Welcome to the Franklin Method Fellowship. I'm your co-host Solange Ross, and I'm joined by my colleague Deborah Chassie. We are physical therapists specializing in the pelvic floor. In this podcast, we share our passion for the Franklin Method and integrating it into functional, everyday movements, all forms of exercise, and our physical therapy practices. We also share a love for talking about the pelvic floor. We hope to inspire you to move better and feel better in your body. Always check with your doctor before beginning an exercise program. This podcast is not intended to be used as medical advice. Let's grab your Franklin Method balls and bands. Enjoy the show.
Jean, can you change your name on your iPad?
Trying to. I don't know how to do it. Pardon me?
Good morning, Nadia. This is Solange. And
Hi,
Monica.
Nadia.
Hi.
And Jean.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So there's 3 dots
Yes.
where you can then rename yourself.
So I'm not seeing where I can name myself. It says chat, apps, captions, meeting settings, backgrounds, whiteboards.
I think you're in the wrong spot. And you're on an iPad, so it might be different. But that's all right. I'm going to let Jay in now.
Well, howdy there.
Good morning, Jay. Thank you for joining us.
Oh my gosh, look at all these people. If I had known I was going to have such an audience, I would have dressed for the occasion. Oh, hold on one second, guys. I'm actually sitting here in my workout clothes. Anyway, well, tell me who all these lovely people are, Deborah.
Yeah, so Solange is my co-host. So she's
Hi,
right
Jay.
at the top.
Hi, guys.
And Monica. And Monica, I think you're a Pilates instructor, is that right?
No, I'm an enthusiast, but not an instructor.
And Jean, where it says iPad, that's Jean. And Nadia. Nadia is from Newfoundland. And then Jay, you're in Orange County, Jay?
I used to be. Hold on one second. My phone, I've got to get rid of the sound. So, yes, I used to be in Orange County at St. Joe's Hospital, actually, where I organized and set up the multidisciplinary breast cancer program. So I'm a general surgeon, surgical oncologist by background. I'm a University of Michigan guy, go blue.
Yeah.
I know you ladies don't care, but for us to go undefeated this year and win the national championship is really a big deal, okay?
Congratulations.
Anyway, so I'm a native of Michigan. Actually spent 24 years at the University of Michigan for med school, general surgery, residency training. Then I stayed on the faculty there for 14 years. Got recruited after that to the tough system for a couple of years. Then I ended up on the West Coast because I chased a woman to the San Francisco Bay Area, where I was on faculty at UCSF for about 12 years. Okay. And then did something very unusual. When you spend 28 straight years in academic life, you don't usually go into private practice at that point. So I ended up down in Orange County at St. Joe's Hospital, setting up my 3rd multidisciplinary breast cancer program.
Okay.
After 47 years of active practice, about 3 years ago, actually stopped operating. The hands are still good. The brain is still good. But the grind of it all, I just said, you know what? I really do. I really miss the people and the patients, but I don't miss the grind. And then the reason we're talking today is about 5 years ago, very accidentally stumbled into the world of exercise oncology. And as a surgical oncologist, I can assure you that at least 90% plus of my surg-oncs, rad-oncs, and med-onc colleagues, we all know that exercise is good, but what we don't know is the hard science. The last 20 years worth of prospective clinical trials that have been done on the value of exercise for cancer patients, prehab, during active treatment, and particularly in long-term survivorship. The amount of science behind all this is just stunning. I mean, we're talking thousands of publications. And the main reason that most of the physicians don't know about this is the fact that virtually all the research has been done by PhD researchers. And it's been particularly done by folks from the American College of Sports Medicine, where I'm now a member of. And it hasn't been really widely circulated out in the medical cancer literature, although that is changing. When I say ASCO, everybody knows what ASCO is, I hope. American Society of Clinical Oncology. Okay, I see. So that's the American Society of Clinical Oncology, which is the largest society of medical oncologists, I think, in the world. They're based out of Chicago. And about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, they put out a guideline that indicates that patients who are in active treatment, in other words, not stage 4, should be referred for aerobic exercise and strength training. So that was a huge step forward. Actually, if you Google the term exercise oncology, or you go to exerciseoncology.com, do you know where you'll end up?
Where?
You'll end up in Sydney, Australia.
Oh.
Yeah, the Aussies are way ahead of us on this. In fact, their ASCO, called COSA, the Clinical Oncology Society of Australia, I think it's 5-6 years ago now, actually made exercise as a standard of adjunctive care for all cancer patients. Now, they haven't fully implemented it nationwide, but they're way ahead of us, and they're some of the absolute leading researchers in the world are in Australia, some of the most published people. And then if I talk about NCCN, do you guys know what NCCN is?
No.
That's the National Consortium of Cancer Networks or Hospitals or whatever. I may have the initials screwed up a little bit. But if you Google NCCN, it's the National Comprehensive, I'm screwing it up. It's the association of all the comprehensive cancer centers in the country. So the Stanfords, the UCSFs, the University of Michigans, et cetera, are all members of NCCN. Their guideline on exercise really comes to bear in survivorship. And they've done all of the necessary research and whatever, and have a very, very strong standard on exercise and survivorship. What we're hoping to do is to get them to also say the same standards apply during active treatment. Anyway, that's just sort of a thumbnail sketch of who I am. I'm with a not-for-profit now out of Ohio called Maple Tree, 2 words, Maple Tree Cancer Alliance. Their website is allthatruntogether.org, mapletreecanceralliance.org. Maple Tree is a not-for-profit. We provide certified exercise oncology specialists to 65 hospitals in the United States, 5 in Brazil. And then we export training programs to multiple countries, where the idea is they will train their physiatrists or physical therapists or whoever to be upscaled to actually work with cancer patients. And I know when we get into pelvic floor surgery and things of that sort, which is, I believe, your interest, if you look at all the physical therapists in the United States, other than lymphedema specialists, greater than 95% of all licensed physical therapists in the country are involved in orthopedic issues. There may be some obviously involved in your world of pelvic floor rehab and things of that sort, but those numbers are really small
Right.
in comparison to the need. And then when we talk about exercise oncology, which is the term now associated with all this, there's a textbook out called Exercise Oncology by Katie Schmitz as the lead editor. Katie is one of the world's top 3 or 4 leading researchers. Think of exercise oncology as a continuum of care. As I said a minute ago, from prehab to active treatment to immediately post-treatment, but more importantly, into long-term survivorship. The impact on cancer recurrence and survivorship from cancers varies tremendously by the nature of the cancer. So some of the best numbers of exercise impacting lower recurrence rates and improving cancer survival are actually in breast cancer, colon cancer, and also into prostate cancer.
So Jay,
Yeah.
we're actually gonna focus on the podcast for today on the pelvic floor.
Okay.
And some people have questions, so this is a question and answer time. People have questions. They've been following us on our podcast. Have you had a chance to view our podcast yet?
I have not. I'm sorry. I just knew we were
Yeah.
linking up and
Right.
that John Powers was the person who I think introduced me to you.
That's right. Yeah. So I really appreciate you being here, as I appreciate everyone being here.
And I apologize for just rambling on, not realizing.
That's right.
I was just trying to give you an overview of my world. I apologize.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I see people taking notes, so people are definitely interested. And people have survived breast cancer, so it's good information for them. So I do appreciate it.
You bet.
And Nadia has something to say about that.
Yeah, so I have to go in 5 minutes because I'm working today. I'm in clinic.
Okay.
So I wondered if I could go with the first question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please do.
So my next client, I believe she has a slightly prolapsed bladder.
Okay.
Not always prolapsed. She's had several bladder repairs, but says they weren't particularly successful and still has a lot of problems with urgency. So I really enjoyed doing the practice with the pelvic floor visualizations. I found those really helpful for myself, but I'm trying to think of analogies or images that would work for somebody who feels that their pelvis is already too open and doesn't really want to open the flower any further and needs analogies that perhaps offer them a little bit more support.
Yeah. Good question. So, yeah, I think it's important. Well, you've watched the episodes 5 and 6, correct?
I haven't watched the most recent one, just the first of the 2 pelvic floor ones.
Okay. So the first one is on breathing, but what we're always looking at is taking a baseline. So we're always checking in. So something that you might want to do with her to start off with is to have her notice her body, notice her tension, notice the breathing, not just in the pelvic floor, but in her whole body, even to notice her posture. And then from there, then have her start touching her pelvis. So introduce her to the different bony landmarks so that she becomes more familiar. It's setting up the brain, getting the brain ready to connect with the body. And then just some simple things like, one of the ones that we've done, let me grab my pelvis. And it's good to show them the pelvic floor muscles too and what they're doing. Are you able to see my pelvis okay? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you want to show her the pelvic floor muscles because a lot of people don't even know where they're at. And if you don't have a model to show it, pull up the, like an app or something, pull up Google and ask for levator ana muscles. And then you can show her where the muscles are and how they're attached to the bones and how you have muscles going from the front, the pubic bone, all the way to the back of the tailbone. And then one that wraps around the anus, kind of like a lasso. And then, so that's going front to back. And then you have muscles side to side that are going from the tendinous arc right by the obturator internus muscle over to the other side. So those muscles are there to support her. And she needs to have both concentric and eccentric contraction. So concentric would be more like, you're coming in for a big squeeze, where eccentric is more like there's a bit of a download, and then the muscle contracts slightly to support it. And so those are the types of exercises that you want to give her so that she can have both concentric and eccentric. But we do these exercises functionally. So not only are we bringing in neuroplasticity, but it's not static exercises like in Kegels. It's more functional exercises, as in walking or reaching or stepping, that type of a thing. And Solange, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would also, especially when it comes to prolapse, everyone's biggest concern is that something's going to fall out, and that if it's the bladder, that something's going to fall out of the body. And I think just to assure her that, look, there is a lot of muscles that are designed to support. There's a lot of connective tissue and fascia as well that connects to everything. And maybe perhaps have her focus on the front part, which supports the bladder, since she has this urgency, but also feels that things are too open. Maybe when she's doing something like sitting up and down from a chair, for example, imagining that widening and narrowing, and having her model with her hands just to get range of motion there, because perhaps she's just squeezing everything and holding all the time out of fear that I had this failed surgery and now something's really wrong. And maybe she needs mobility, even though she has that sense of openness. If the muscles are too tight, it's as if someone would be like squeezing you in the middle and things would push down. Perhaps she's gripping all the time, so that's giving her the sense of being open. It's like, have you ever seen that rubber chicken where like you squeeze it and then right? But
That's true. That's true.
If she's in a state of that because of fear, sort of like frozen and gripped, that can give that sense of feeling open, when actually what she needs is that mobility. And as Deborah was saying, that concentric and then the eccentric, the balance between the two.
And
the image that was coming to me was of a clamshell. You know how clamshells have that hinge, but if you try to pry open a clam, it's not going to go. They're very strong. So having just enough movement in it as the pretty clamshell, but without being, completely cracked open.
Something that I'd like to have everybody do is just notice their pelvic floor right now.
I have to go now.
Okay.
The session starts now. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the invite, and it's lovely to meet all you guys.
Nice to meet you, Nadia.
Bye. So Solange, you were going to add something, and then I'll go ahead and add something to her comments, and then we can move forward.
Yeah, I was also just thinking with the urgency as well, something that she could do functionally would be in walking. We did the exercise where we imagined the pelvic half moving forward and back. So if she imagined that, then it's kind of getting this dynamic movement of supporting the bladder while walking. So maybe if she does something that's really a functional pelvic floor exercise for her, and to notice if perhaps she's holding in all the time and not getting this sort of scooping action, which would happen with the leg swing as we swing forward. So that might be something that when Nadia listens to this, she can check in with.
Yeah. And the other thought that came to me too was about the mouth. So if all of you just notice your pelvic floor right now and just see what it feels like sitting there, and maybe go ahead and just do a little squeeze just to see what it feels like. And then pucker your mouth. So make sure the pelvic floor is relaxed, and then pucker your mouth. And then open it wide. And again, pucker. And open. And notice your pelvic floor as you do it, and pucker. And then open. And do you notice when you pucker that you get a little bit of tightening in your pelvic floor muscles? And then when you open your mouth that it relaxes? So there's definitely a connection between your mouth and the pelvic floor. So that's something that somebody can do where they're not really thinking about, oh, I got to tighten my pelvic floor muscles. It's just more subconscious where they're actually co-contracting at the same time or co-relaxing.
And that might be another great thing for Nadia too, to check in with her, to have her do those and see when she opens her mouth wide, can she feel a difference in her pelvic floor? Even though she feels the pelvis more open, when she does these movements, perhaps she can feel a change in the tone.
Yeah.
In the pelvis, in the pelvic floor.
Right. Good. And we also have Hillary with us. So Hillary, your camera's not on. Are you okay with that? Hillary, are you able to unmute yourself? Okay. Well, that's all right. She's got 2 twin boys and she might be multitasking.
Sounds good.
Right. Anyway, so Monica and Jean and Jay, you may have had questions. I know, Jean, you did. You want to go first with your questions?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, first of all, to the two of you for offering this. This is great. I love the podcast. I am recovering from an injury. I think I was kind of set up for it in my pelvic floor and then had an injury actually in physical therapy. But again, I think I was set up for it. And I went to 3 different physical therapists and all of their exercises just hurt me. They were too much. And so I just appreciate that I can do these exercises and they don't hurt me. I mean, I have to do them, sometimes start slow, like 1 or 2 and work into it. But it's great to be able to do something for myself. So, yeah, I just kind of want to make sure that I'm doing the pelvic floor exercises correctly. I showed Debbie what I was doing yesterday and I was kind of doing one of them wrong. So, okay, so one of them was the orange balls. You know, you sit on them on your sits bones. And I was confused about the imagery. So if I have them underneath me and I'm rolling back and I'm visualizing a fan opening and closing. When I roll back, is that the fan closed or the fan open?
That's the closing.
So it's closing, so they're closer together when I roll back and they're farther apart. Okay.
Where do you imagine your fan? Tell me where you see the fan in your body.
So so that would be the tailbone, I think.
So the tailbone is the handle.
Yeah.
And then it's radiating forward to the pubic bone and then behind the hip joints. Is that where you imagine it? Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you curl back, that's the fan closing.
Okay.
And when you come forward, that's the fan opening.
Okay. All right. Because some exercises, I feel it more dramatically. Like if I'm doing a squat, I sense the sit bones going apart more than in this exercise.
So it's two different images. One is the fan, because that's the closing of the levator ani, the pelvic floor.
Okay.
And then this is the opening. And then the other image you're using is your sit bones coming together as you curl back, and then your sit bones going apart.
Right.
Or you could think about the muscles that go from sit bone to sit bone, those shortening or sliding together like this, and then apart.
Okay.
But you can feel that your sit bones moving, right? And you can feel also.
Yeah, right.
Deborah, do you want to show her just even like the image of the pelvis rocking on the chair? Maybe that would be a nice visual for her.
I'm going to bring the camera down a little bit. Now, is that a good enough picture?
Yes.
All right. So here's the pelvis. And I'm going to kind of turn it to its side a little bit too. So normally you're sitting like this. And then when you rock back, that's when the sit bones are coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go forward, they're going apart.
Mm-hmm.
So rolling
Okay.
back. Think of your sit bones like a rocking chair too. It's kind of a nice image, like a smooth image. So rolling back, they come together. Rolling forward, they go apart. So slide together, slide apart. And when we say slide together, those are the muscle fibers coming together. And then as we say slide apart, they're releasing to lengthen the muscle.
Or that's where you could think about the image of the fan, either the muscles or the fan closing
Mm-hmm.
and then
Okay.
opening. And I encourage you to notice, do you have more ability to close or for the sit bones to come together or for them to come apart? And can you sense, does one sit bone feel like it's moving more than the other? And if that's the case, can you try to, with your imagery, make it more balanced? Like maybe one side of the fan comes in a little bit more than the other. Or when you go into extension, one side opens more than the other, or one side opens first. And can you try to, and it's okay if you sense these asymmetries. We're not
Right.
symmetrical beings, but can we encourage there to be, and can we imagine there to be more symmetry?
That's a good point because I haven't noticed that per se.
And
Yeah.
Deborah and I were talking about an exercise that we thought that would be great for you. And maybe this is a good time to show it
Okay.
to help you with the sit bones coming apart. We were even thinking of, if you imagine there to be a fan on your back, on your sacrum,
Mm-hmm.
first just breathing and taking a breath. And can you imagine this fan here widening and opening? And as the fan is opening, your tailbone moving back. And if you don't have the fan, Jean, you could even just have your fingertips pointed down. And can you imagine when you breathe in, your tailbone kind of swinging back towards your fingertips?
I'm thinking of a rooster's feathers for some reason, upside down.
Okay, I like that. You've got your rooster and your feathers are moving back or ruffling or opening.
And it's just thinking with my mind. I don't need to just breathe.
Just breathe and imagine and let your breath follow that image.
Okay. I think I'm getting better because if I would have done that before, it would be a little bit painful to continue doing that. So yeah, that's a good exercise. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, there was another exercise that we talked about too regarding some of your questions. And that would you take the orange ball, and here I am in my chair, and put it right behind your tailbone, like that, so that you're kind of sitting into it. And then when you take a breath in, just to imagine that your tailbone is pushing into that. Because remember, when you breathe in, you're creating more space in the whole pelvic outlet, right? And so as you breathe in here, then the tailbone is going to lift. And so then you'll feel that extra pressure into the ball.
Okay. Oh, that's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just make sure that you're not sitting on it, because if your tailbone is sore, to sit directly on it might be too much pressure. So you can sort of just start with it just kind of pressed behind you so that it's giving you some input. It's giving you some input so that you can then imagine and sense that tailbone moving back into the ball.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So question, I was just thinking about these orange balls and the sits balls and sit on underneath each sits bone. Like we do that exercise where you roll. What would it be can you do that too much? I was thinking this morning, like, I didn't have time to do all of them, but as I eat my breakfast, I just sat on them. They were like my cushion, and I just kind of wiggled a little bit while I was eating. Is that too much to do that, like for, like 10 minutes or something like that? Or would that be a good thing to do to keep things kind of stretched out?
I think if you're tolerating it well and you want to, like, let's say you're even sending an email at the computer and you're writing something and you want to just like sit on it and do a little bit movement. And then when you take the balls away, then notice how your pelvic floor feels. So the important thing is to have a baseline. So where is it starting? And then to do your exercises. In this case, it's just, I'm having breakfast. I'm just moving on the balls. Like, I'm just playing, which is good. You're curious, you're playing. And then when you take them away, to notice that, oh, well, I do feel more relaxed. It feels like more space. Deborah also uses the image of, I love it when she says it, does your pelvic floor feel like a pancake?
Definitely. Everything just went, or like a fried egg that's old and it just goes like that in the pan, it's just everywhere. Yeah.
And so noticing that, because that's something that we don't normally feel, that spreading, that openness, that relaxation. And many of us, if you asked us, well, how does your pelvic floor feel just sitting here? We would say, probably fine. Like, I don't know that I have pelvic floor tension. But then when we do the exercise that you did and we roll on the balls and we take them away and we feel that, we're like, well, that feels so much better. So
right.
Noticing that change. So if you're feeling good doing that and you're feeling that pancake sensation, then I think keep going with it. Like, I think that's a good exercise for you.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you for the tailbone exercise. That's good. Because that's kind of my main, I guess what we're identifying, my main thing is stretching those long muscles out from front to back. Right, Debbie?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I just want to say, I appreciate your comments about how you're feeling about the podcast and how much it's actually benefiting you. And just to hear the change in your terminology, like really grasping onto the images. And that helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know the names of the muscles too, some of them.
And also too, there are a lot of people who, because of pain and because they do exercises and the exercises hurt them and have had similar experiences like you, these exercises are really designed to be simple so that anyone can do it and really accessible. And, you start with the dosage. I like how you said, sometimes I do just 1 or 2 repetitions. And that's great. That's so beneficial. It doesn't have to be like we think exercise should be 8 to 10 reps or 20 reps, whatever it is, if we're thinking about endurance, but it doesn't. The dosage is so important to the individual, especially if you're starting with a painful condition.
Right. I learned the hard way.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad I found you. I was thanking God this morning. There was just briefly for 10 seconds or so, there was a snowy owl that arrived in Southern California last year. And I happened with my daughter to go see it about 10 minutes from home. And I ran into a friend that went to Dr. Chassie, and she told me about Dr. Chassie. Now, how random is that? I don't believe in coincidence. So I'm just glad Dr. Chassie was brought into my life. Thank you.
Monica, did you have a question? You had something good for us.
Well, I have sort of 2.
Okay.
And again, thank you. I wanted to say as well, thank you both for the podcast. It's been really lovely to sort of open up that area and think of it differently. And I guess because of how when I first had my first child, was taught, and it was similar, you talked about the zipper, but I was taught pulling up like a staircase, going up, or stair at a time, stair at a time. And just wondering, is there still a place for that kind of exercise, or is it better to kind of put that to the side and just continue on with the functional movements, or is that sort of internal pulling up thing kind of counteracting the exercises you show?
That's a great question. And look, people have been doing pelvic floor exercises or what you're describing as a Kegel or Kegel.
Yeah, sorry, it's an Australian Kegel.
But when we think about something like that, we're thinking about something static. People might be doing it whether they're lying down, or maybe we're practicing in sitting or standing. And it doesn't mirror what we do in daily life. We don't just sit with things pulled up, like we're constantly moving. And even when we're sitting still, we're shifting and, we're bending, getting up and down, walking. So this is just strengthening in one position.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, many people don't have a good image of their pelvic floor. So they may be doing stuff like a zipper, pulling up, and they might not be accessing the muscles correctly.
Mm.
So when you do exercises like what we're showing, and you use imagery like the sit bones and the fan or a flower, the beauty of it is that your muscles work in just the right amount. So your brain processes the image and sends a message to your muscles that this is how much effort that's required based on that image, based on what we need. So we're not over squeezing and doing all of these contractions and relaxing. And most people, when it comes to exercise, are using way too much than what it's required. And I think it's because they think they need to feel something. So it's not that a pelvic, like a Kegel, is bad. I mean, if you're practiced in it and you have a good sense of your body, and you know that you don't have a pelvic pain condition, or that you don't have a pelvic floor that is starting with too much tone, then it could be a fine exercise for you to feel your pelvic floor drawing up and feel it relaxing all the way down. But what I find for people is that this relaxing all the way down, this spreading like a pancake, which is not something that's natural, people don't train in that. And that's really important when it comes for absorbing force. Like when we do stuff and we jump or we cough or we laugh, we do stuff, it requires range of motion for the pelvic floor, not for the pelvic floor just to hold on with what it's got. So if we don't train that range of motion, then that's where people end up with incontinence and issues like that.
Yeah. And my favorite, go ahead, Solange.
I was also going to say, like, many people find Kegels incredibly boring. Like I think when I first, I think my first exposure to it, which was in physical therapy school, like the recommendation was like 100 a day. And I was like, 100? You lost me. Like I left the room after doing like 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, and I was one of those that I literally did during my pregnancies, all my pregnancies, I did 100 a day.
Of course you did. You were
right?
You just do the recommendations. You're like 100, I'll do it.
That is true. That's an overachiever for you. Well, but I do have to say, though, even though I did 100 a day, I realized later when I went on to pelvic floor training for patient care that I was just doing it quickly, like contract, relax, contract, relax, contract, relax. There was no hold to it or anything like that. That was a long time ago when I had But I so much appreciate the way that we're teaching pelvic floor training now. And just using imagery along with it. Like my favorite exercise to give to patients is closing the book and breathing into the pelvic bowl. So closing the book would be, I'd place my hands on their transverse abdominis. And you can do that too. So to find the transverse abdominis, right here is your ASIS, and you come in about an inch and you're still above the crease, right? So just putting your hands there, and then in your mind only, I say to people, is to imagine that your ilium, so basically it's the pelvis part, your ilium are the ends of a book, and your sacrum is a book binder. And to imagine, only in your mind, you don't use any muscle control intentionally, imagine closing the book. So closing the book like this. And so by doing that, then the transverse abdominis muscle co-contracts with the pelvic floor muscles, the levator ani muscles. And so then I can determine if they're contracting their pelvic floor muscles symmetrically, because most of the time, one side is weak and one side is strong. So we want a symmetrical contraction, and biofeedback will not pick that up. So anyway, I have them do that. And then I ask them, which side did you feel that contracted first? And most of the time people don't know, but this is also where I want to see how in touch are they with their pelvic floor muscles. And so then I ask them, how did that feel? What did you notice? And if they get it right, that's really good. And it doesn't have to be correct in that they're doing it symmetrically, because they'll work on that. So let's say the left side is weak and the right side is strong. And then I have them imagine closing the book from left to right. So then they're initiating the contraction from the weak side first, and the opposite side will automatically contract. And that's such a great way to introduce people to actually feeling the pelvic floor. Mm-hmm. Then the next step is to have them breathe into their pelvic floor and imagine the sit bones floating apart. So, I may say, imagine sending your breath into the pelvis, and then imagine the sit bones here as you're breathing in floating apart. And so that would be the eccentric contraction. And so then that's part of their homework, is to do that on a regular basis. And then we start progressing with exercises and adding, more awareness to it.
I love that closing the book exercise. And I just think when I watch people do a pelvic floor contraction, like when I do an evaluation, I'm looking at their abdomen, and I have my hands where Debbie showed on the transverse abdominis, and they're doing the closing the book, but adding this muscular effort on top of it, where it's drawing in so much. And it's just interesting when we really go back to using the image, that keeping everything light, that's really what we need. Because that, when we do stuff functionally, we don't need to grip and hold on in our pelvic floor to be scooped in and up, we need things to be light. And it's just so amazing when you watch someone do the pelvic floor contraction, where they're actually contracting and scooping up, and maybe imagining an ice cream scoop, but contracting on top of it, versus then doing something like close the book. And it's a whole different muscle recruitment pattern, and it's a much lower level of effort.
Yeah, and as trained pelvic floor specialists, we're able to palpate even just that gentle transverse abdominis contraction.
But it's an interesting thing for people to play with too, to contract and do maybe what they've been trained in, and then scale it back and just play with the images and see the difference, and also how that feels in their body. Did you have a part two, Monica?
Oh, it was unmuted, yes. It was more of a silly question, really, but
There's no silly questions.
Yeah, but it's, and it's maybe an overshare as well in this format. But it's when I like sort of first half of learning about Kegels was one way to think about it is of when we go to the bathroom and to then hold while you're peeing. And then another argument I heard later on was like, that's like the worst time to do it because then you're having, even though that's the time you think about it, because then you're creating issues in your bladder and other things. So is there anything to kind of confirm on that, even though that's not something I do anymore anyway? But I just thought it was interesting that there were two schools of thought on the positive and the negatives of that.
Yeah, it's definitely not a place where we want to be practicing our pelvic floor training because we don't want, when we go to the bathroom, right? Our muscles need to be able to keep things in when they need to be in, right? And when we go to the bathroom, they need to relax and let go, and we want to completely empty. And if we do something like midstream pull up and in to practice our Kegels, then we can get ourselves caught up in a Kegel and not completely eliminate. So, I've heard people say, like, if you want to get in touch with the muscle, like if someone really wants to just do it once, just to see how these muscles work to stop the flow of urine, just to check in and see how that works, that would be okay. But I guarantee you don't even have to do that. Just if you're going to the bathroom and just imagine, let's say the stall wasn't locked and someone walked in on you, I guarantee you'd be able to stop midstream and your muscles would work. So if you just imagine that, like that's how your muscles would work. But we want to really relax completely and don't develop an issue where we're not properly emptying when we're going to the bathroom.
Yeah, it's good to realize that message comes from our brain to let go in the pelvic floor. So, just to imagine the connection between your brain and your bladder and letting go. It's like just this direct access.
Deborah, I have another obligation. It's been a delight to meet you all this morning. If you would like to ever talk offline about the world of exercise oncology, it would be my delight to do so. Okay.
Right. I would love that. Yeah, because I'm a lymphedema specialist also.
I saw that. I've been on your website while we've been chatting. So
Yeah.
and I got workers right out my window beating away out here as well. So, but I unfortunately have another obligation. So a real delight. I've been fascinated by the discussion. And Monica, what is that accent of yours that I'm detecting?
It's Australian, yeah.
I sitting here, is it South African or Australian? I've been to Australia 5 times. And,
oh wow, yeah.
And I love it down there. And the good news is they love Yanks. So anyway, delight to meet you guys. Continue great success. It's a very difficult area that you work in, but really needed. But as I said, Deborah, if there's anything offline that we can talk about that would be of mutual interest, I'd really look forward to doing that. Okay.
That sounds great. I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Take care, guys. Thanks so very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
So, I've been staying in touch with Hillary through texting. So she's able to show her voice or her face. She's, like I said, she's got twin boys and she's homeschooling them and all of that. So yeah, so great questions.
Yeah, and we had another question that someone submitted, right? The best question, what is the best exercise for incontinence?
Yeah.
And it's a great question. I think we've touched a little bit on it so far today, having talked about Kegels. So I think we can agree that it's not Kegels.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I'm just kind of thinking to a situation. So someone going through cancer treatment, and so they're basically, like say getting chemo treatment and then just having an experience of it affecting their pelvic floor muscles, how to best support that. Because that's kind of like if somebody's medicated or something of that nature, then how is that going to affect them? So give me a second here. All right, so Hillary just signed off. There. So anyway, yeah, just when they're in that medicated state, then how to better control their pelvic floor. And I hadn't considered that before. I would think that, just like focusing in on breathing would be really good. Some of the basics. And then practicing some pelvic floor awareness during functional activities. I think that would be really helpful too. So, Solange, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, and I was thinking too, right? So when you're undergoing treatment, right, and if you don't feel well, right, let's say you've been vomiting, right, or you have abdominal pain, right, like that's a lot of pressure on the pelvic floor, and also like you're probably have been, curled instead of opening, right? So yeah, like getting in touch with the sit bones and then focusing on breathing. So can you breathe and feel the sit bones widening, or thinking about the diamond widening, and then just doing the seated exercises that we did where you're moving the pelvis forward and back through a rotation, side to side. And then the paintbrush that we did, painting the seat with the paintbrush. All those can probably feel right. They'll probably feel quite nice. And just to help encourage a better posture overall, and just better support throughout the core. So I think that would be really important in the recovery.
Yeah. Jean or Monica, go ahead. Solange, you had.
Did we want to go back to the best exercises for incontinence?
Yeah.
Kind of just map that out.
Right.
A little bit. We wish it was a magic bullet, though. I think, that kind of would be boring. This is all really, we're here because we're curious about our body, and we're, we all are shaped a little bit differently. We all have different, shape of our bones. We all have a different ability to flex and extend. And when we do our movements, so we all have a unique movement for ourselves. So I would think when it comes to incontinence, the first thing, sensing and feeling where your pelvic floor is starting from. So going back to in each episode, we have a check-in where we notice and feel our body. So taking that time to sense, do you feel that your pelvic floor is more gripped? Or do you feel that you start and your pelvic floor is able to kind of relax down into the surface that you're sitting on? Or maybe you notice it and there's a little bit of asymmetry in the bones when you're sitting. So maybe you notice it as that. So having this time to check in, and then experiencing when you breathe that sensation of the sit bones coming apart and the fan widening. And then when you breathe out, the fan narrowing. And you could do that also placing your hands on your lower belly. So as you're breathing into the pelvic floor, can you feel a movement of your lower belly moving forward into your hands? And when you breathe out, feeling your belly move away from your hands. So just starting with the breathing, because when people have incontinence, sometimes this canister, our torso, it gets frozen. We don't get the appropriate movement. So starting with breathing and then getting into mobility. Do you feel your sit bones moving together? Do you feel them moving apart? And you could do this in sitting. You could also do it in standing. So when you're squatting, do you feel like you get the sit bones moving apart? Or do you feel like when you squat, your knees come forward And some people, when they bend, their sit bones come together. So they're actually still keeping the sit bones together and not getting a widening. So going back to moving the pelvis and moving it in 3 dimensions, which we go through in the exercises. So getting forward and back, side to side. So one sit bone down, the other up, like a pendulum. And then getting some rotation. And noticing when you do this, does one side move differently than the other? And you can check in left to right with any of this stuff. When you're rolling forward and back, do you feel one side move more? Does one side move first? This will start to clue you in, maybe I have an asymmetry. Maybe one part is tight. Maybe everything is tight, or maybe perhaps everything starts and it's too open and you need to get more of the sit bones coming together. So this will help you become your own detective.
Right. And the other thing too is we talked about symmetry. We want the pelvic floor muscles to be contracting simultaneously, unless you're doing an activity where you're walking, one side is lengthening, the other side is shortening, and so forth. So a good test to determine, are you doing this symmetrically, or which side is your stronger side? So here you are sitting in a chair. And do both of you, Monica and Jean, do you both have a way to get up from your chair and either go to the right or go to the left?
I would tend to go to the right.
You would tend to go to the right. And then Jean, Monica?
When I'm getting up from a chair, you mean?
Right. So you're going to get up from a chair and then you're going to go do something. And you could either go to the left or you could go to the right. Which direction are you going to go?
I think it depends what chair I'm sitting in, where things are.
That's why I asked. So
So
you have the option.
I've got a chair next to me here, so I'll go this way. But if I'm sitting over there, then I do go the opposite
So
way.
what if you're
It's usually the direction to the kitchen, wherever.
So if you're walking, all right, so here I'm going to walk, right? Walking. And then you tell me to turn around. Which direction am I going to go? So if I ask you to walk and then I say, turn around, do you go to the left or do you go to the right?
No, I don't think I'm conscious of it. I'd have to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about you, Solange?
I definitely would go to the right for sure. It's like when I'm sitting, I notice too, like part of my pattern is like my right side is like ready to get up at any moment. It's like
maybe my left side. Yeah.
Like the kids are calling, someone needs something. So I'm already like a little bit up.
Right.
I'm not fully sitting in the chair. I'm half up.
Yeah. So there you go. All right. So that tells me that you're probably more right. I mean, you, Monica, would be left side dominant. Solange and Jean and myself are right side dominant. Because I will always turn to the right.
Is that associated with your dominant hand?
No, it's actually associated with the pelvic floor.
Okay.
Yeah. So Monica, are you left-handed or right-handed?
I'm right-handed, but when I was young, I used to have both until I had someone tell me I had to just do one. So a lot of people will see me use the left a lot, even though I write with my right. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
Oh, you should keep training that. Train that
I
left
know.
back.
I know. I had a cousin who was like, that's so wrong. You should just do one.
And I've been doing the hula hoop. So, with the hula hoop, it's easy just to do one side. That's what you did when you were a kid, normally one side. But what I'm doing is both sides. So first I do a minute on one side and then I do a minute on the other side. Back to that 100 kegels. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Do you have any final questions, Jean or Monica? Or comments, Solange?
Oh, I was just wondering, we did the feet exercise. Monica, I'm not sure if you had listened to the last one that they gave. There was a foot exercise. And I was just curious, I didn't catch it. I need to listen to it again, but how that exercise fits into the pelvic floor. Just curious.
So is that where the feet are sliding apart and sliding together?
No, that's the one where you have the heel right underneath the knee. It's the one we were talking about yesterday,
Yeah.
where you said it was sort of like a matrix thing.
Right.
And I was just wondering how that, because it was a pelvic floor dynamic video, I was wondering.
Right. So the reason that we did that is because when I treat people for pelvic floor issues, one of the things that I always do is release the y-axis in the lower extremity, so the tibia and the femur. So that way it clears energy, because if there's any blocked electrical flow, it'll actually help clear that. It stimulates what's called piezoelectricity, which basically means the molecules are vibrating together. And so they're finding their new position. And so when they're doing that, they're actually releasing excess kinetic energy that maybe has been overstored in the body. And in order for everything else to release in the body, it has to have exits. So it will use the long bones to exit the excess energy. So anyway, the point is that when I'm testing people or treating them for pelvic floor issues, it's one of the first things that I do, because automatically, if that's all that I do, they actually start feeling better.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that would be a good thing to do daily to make sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to do it. Yeah.
Okay. Now I understand well, you had sort of mentioned that yesterday, but I didn't put it together. So I needed to
Well, I'm glad you
ask.
Now,
Ask
Monica,
again.
here too. That's Monica. That's in the patron content.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this is an extra thing that I didn't have access to because I don't remember it.
I'll show you what it is.
I was doing the chair one. That was really good. And then the lifting and the feet. And I could really feel my jaw relax afterwards as well.
Oh, nice.
I have a lot of tension there and I know they're connected. So,
Well, that's
Which exercise was that, Monica?
it was the series of them in the episode 6, I think it was. There was a few where it was like lifting the leg and then back.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Those and then going up and then the half, leg on a chair and
Right.
opening that way and stretching, all of those.
Okay.
And then the feet in and out as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I love how it's not an isolated exercise and it affects your whole body. Every time I do the sits balls and I do this little thing, go like that, and then all of a sudden I can lift my arm well. I'm like, I don't know how to explain it. I don't have to explain it. It just works.
Yeah.
I love it. You feel alive.
Yeah.
This is so great.
It basically does exactly that. It wakes you up, wakes up the tissues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such beautiful content. So thank you both. And it's really lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
Appreciate your
I'm learning a lot.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. And if you have any more questions, Jean, email us. I can't wait to hear about your progress, as you continue to do the exercises and the more that we'll share, how that's going to continue to change your body in a positive way.
Well, I'm just really, really excited because I feel like in the last 3 weeks, there's been a breakthrough. So I feel like I'm being given my life back. So I'm very, very thankful. Very, very thankful.
Beautiful.
Yay.
Yay for life back. Yeah.
So for people who are just listening, and if you have any questions that we haven't addressed, you can email that to us. The email is franklinmethodfellowship@gmail.com, and we will answer those questions and then record it in another Q&A so we can get back to you. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
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 Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we would greatly appreciate it if you would leave us a review. You can also become a patron of the podcast. Join our patron program to get access to movement practices from each episode, bonus episodes, and Q&As where we answer any questions you have about the practices. We look forward to practicing with you and continuing to share our passion. As we say in the Franklin Method, better information leads to better navigation. Keep practicing, and we'll see you next time.